Hello there, and welcome to the Rotoworld Fantasy MLB Q&A. My name is Chris Crawford. James Schiano will be joining us shortly. Thanks so much for everybody who's popped in. Really appreciate the support. First time of me hosting one of these in a very long time, so very excited to do that. Please leave your fantasy questions, trade deadline questions, prospect questions, whatever type of questions you have. Happy to answer them. Getting real close to the deadline, which is a hectic time for us, but also a really fun time. Just really appreciate everybody tuning in. Hit like on the stream if you guys don't mind, and make sure you're subscribed so you know when we do go live. Again, James Schiano will be joining us shortly. Let's get to your questions. Dad, thanks for having this again. Tyler Fitzgerald has hit 3 homers in his last 3 appearances. Do we foresee any continued success out of him rest of season? Does he overtake Thairo Estrada in terms of playing time? Really good question. And Fitzgerald's been a guy that I've kind of liked since he was at Louisville. I believe he was a 4th round pick in 2019, 20, one of those years. They all kind of blend together. I think that he should overtake Estrada in terms of playing time. I'm not 100% sure that he will. The interesting thing to me about Fitzgerald is sometimes we hear about a player who just gets it. I think that Fitzgerald is one of those players who just kind of gets it. You take a look at him, and he has a chase rate of only 19.9%, which means 80% of the time he is not swinging at pitches outside of the strike zone. That's a very impressive number. The power is there. It's not elite, but he barrels the baseball 8.8% of the time. That'll certainly play. The speed is there, 7 stolen bases. He's not an elite defender, but I think he's a good enough. If I have any question marks here, it's that I don't think that a 299 type of average is sustainable. I think he is more of a true talent 240, 250 type of guy. In fact, expected batting average is exactly 243. But I do think that there's some interest here, or intrigue here, I should say. I'm interested in the intrigue that Tyler Fitzgerald provides. I'm not rushing to go get him, but if you're playing in a deeper league and you're looking for a little bit of pop, a little bit of stolen bases, especially in an on-base league because the approach is so good, I'm extremely interested in Tyler Fitzgerald. The question mark is he going to play more than Estrada? And he should. Estrada's been bad this year. And I could see Estrada actually being a player that they consider moving at the deadline. It's going to depend on where the Giants are. But yeah, I do think that that makes some sense. And if you're looking for some help, I would be interested in adding him. HPHP, well, it could be hip hip or could be a lot of things. I'll sneak this one before 10 a.m. With Freed out, who are we stashing? AJ Smith-Shawver or Waldron, who was awful but now on a rehab mission? Thank you. Thank you. I would probably, of those two, rather stash Waldron. I think that there is a much higher floor. Smith-Shawver, his stuff is certainly intriguing. It's just I have real doubts about whether or not he's ready to be an MLB pitcher. He's a guy who's in my top 100. And for those of you who don't know, I am a big prospect guy. I do a lot of prospect, stuff. I have my top 10 list every week for NBC Sports, ranking the top prospects who can help you in fantasy for 2024. I think he's a nice long-term play. I don't think he's somebody I could really trust in 2024. Now, like you said, Waldron had some good moments and he's had some clunkers. I think I would just prefer to go with Waldron. I would be looking elsewhere between the two. I can't think of anybody right off the top of the dome who could be available, but between those two, I think I would go with Waldron. Again, thank you so much for your question. And again, whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitch or however you're getting this, I just really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. Dad, what do we do with Max Scherzer? Trade, drop, hold? Boy, if you could trade him, I would certainly be looking to do that. I'm not dropping him just yet. I am concerned, though. That last start was really ugly. The second inning was, and I covered that game, of course, for Rotoworld, and it was not good. It was not a good second inning. So, and he just hasn't quite looked the same. I've seen Max Scherzer do this before. We've all seen Max Scherzer do this before, right? Where It kind of looks like what's going on here, and then things go really well really quick. So if you can trade him for a more consistent mid-rotation starter, yeah, I would do that. If you can't do that, if people are lowballing or just have no interest, and there's a good chance people will have no interest, I'm probably just leaving Max Scherzer alone. He is I think he is a solid mid-rotation option for the rest of the year, even though very little of that was suggested over those last couple of outings, particularly the one over the weekend. But I wouldn't drop him just yet. I'd probably just hold steady. But if somebody offers you anything of substance for Max Scherzer, I would absolutely be all over that. Trexit, what would you do with Bobby Miller and redraft points? Man. So this is a tough one because he's obviously been a big disappointment. But I also just take a look at that Dodgers rotation and the issues they have. And yes, Clayton Kershaw and Tyler Glasnow are returning. I would have a little bit of FOMO dropping Bobby Miller. I would just like, man, if I drop this guy and he ends up being a staple of their rotation, and we've seen success from Bobby Miller. We've obviously seen not as much as Max Scherzer, obviously, but we have seen him look like a very competent starting pitcher. And I can't help but note that he plays for one of the best teams in baseball. They've struggled as of late a little bit, not lived up to expectations is probably a better word than struggle. I think I would hang on to Bobby Miller. It would depend on the other options. And if you're in here, please let me know like what other options you could pick up instead of Bobby Miller. But I think I'm holding for now. And that might be me having a little bit of, telling people to drop Hunter Brown. And now Hunter Brown is one of the more not talented. He's always had talent. It was never a question of talent with Hunter Brown. One of the most productive starters in baseball. Bobby Miller's just as good, if not better. There are reasons to believe that he can still be successful in the next year. Let's take a look. Hold on just one sec, guys. Sorry about that. That was James. He'll be joining us in about 5 minutes. Jada, this is a fun one. Pick 3 for next year's points league. Cole Reagans at $6, Garrett Crochet at $5, Wyatt Langford at $9, James Wood at $5, and Junior Caminero at $3. Boy, you got a nice little roster there, my friend. Oh, boy. I would probably go. I'm definitely keeping Langford. That's my one for sure. Even though he's the most expensive of those players, I would probably go. This is a good one. I would probably go Crochet, Langford, Wood, and I would be trying hard to trade Cole Reagans. I love Cole Reagans, even though his last start was a bit of an oof magoof, as I like to say. But I do believe that he can be a guy who can help you for sure. It's just I believe in Wyatt Langford's upside so much, and James Wood, I might like James Wood upside even more than Wyatt Langford. Crochet is an obvious one. I love Junior Caminero, and he ranks number 1 on my list for top prospects that can help you this year, just ahead of Kobe Mayo. I think you have to go with the guys who are a little more ingrained right now, if you were keeping of those 3. Love Cole Reagans, love Junior Caminero, love all of those guys. I was going to pick the 3. I would go Crochet, Langford, Wood. That's a really good question, and congratulations on the roster. I think you're a Seattle fan, so let's go out west for the next question. How do we like Tyler Locklear? Good speculative ad. Do we feel he could produce more than Ty France? Yep, you got that right. I am a Seattle fan. You can see the Griffey jersey in the back. You see the supersonic style Seahawk hat from my good friends at Simply Seattle. Not an advertisement, just telling you it's a really good website. Yeah, so more productive than Ty France is kind of darning with faint praise a little bit, right? But yes, I do think Tyler Locklear can be a guy who is interesting. He is somebody who, he came out of VCU, and a lot of people were questioning that draft pick because he was a senior and he was playing in I can't even remember what league VCU's in anymore. All of these things change so much. But anyway, not playing in one of the major power conferences. BCU has produced MLB talent, but Tyler Locklear has been much better than anybody anticipated. The ball just jumps off of this guy's bat. Like, he makes so much hard contact, and he's still developing the power, but it's starting to show up. He hit a couple of home runs in his call-up with Seattle. There are some swing and miss issues, which is true about, talking about being a Seattle fan. I see it a lot. There are lots of swing and miss issues with him. I would be willing to add him as a speculative ad for sure, just because of the power, just because of the fact that I think he's going to get a chance to play every day. They did also call up Jason Vossler, who has put up really good numbers in AAA, but Jason Vossler is not a fantasy relevant guy, and I can't see him being the answer at first base to replace Ty France. Yeah, I think Tyler Locklear would be worth a good speculative ad. Just keep in mind that the average may not be there, but I think that the power could be. And the worst thing is that you cut bait and add somebody later. As for before anybody even asks if Ty France is worth a fantasy pickup, I would say no. Just not enough hard contact. Doesn't add any value on the bases whatsoever. Now, Tyler Locklear is not going to add a lot either. But I would have to say that Ty France is somebody that probably just profiles best as a lefty killer off the bench type of guy. And those guys can have value in DFS for sure. If they're in the lineup, it's a nice guy to add. But in terms of redraft, I think Ty France's days are just a little bit over. Uncle Ted, what's going on, buddy? Do you think Weston Wilson could be this year's Chas McCormick? Older righty with pop and speed, hitting 7th in a great lineup. I wouldn't go that far. I think that's an interesting comp that you make, though. I think Wilson is more of a utility guy, but getting a chance to get some playing time is certainly interesting. I imagine that's a team that's looking to make an upgrade. We've already heard a bunch of rumors along those lines. In a deeper league, or, if you've got a fun or not great bench to play with, I think that I would probably give him a shot. But I just don't see Weston Wilson being super fantasy relevant in the long term, especially because I think that is a team that is definitely going to acquire somebody by the deadline. But yeah, you can definitely do worse in the meantime. Tracksuit, you're very welcome. That's that. I'm glad that we're on the same page. Time to stash Zebby ahead of Povich, Festa, or DL Hall. That's a tough one. I am a big DL Hall fan, even though he has the worst name of any pitcher ever. It is just a horrible name, but I love that stuff. Povich, the command has just been so wretched at times, but that swing and miss stuff is palpable. I think Festa's a nice little combination of both. I think I would stash Hall first, and then I would put Festa, Zebby, then Povich. I love Povich's stuff. It's just that command is so bad. By the way, Chase McDermott looks like he's going to make his MLB debut against, I believe, Miami, which adds to the intrigue because Miami obviously not very good. Not an elite pitching prospect, but I think he has good enough swing and miss stuff. I believe 159 strikeouts and close to 90 innings, something along those lines. So yeah, I would probably put it in that order, like the reverse of what you have there: Hall, Festa, Povich, and Zebby. But it's certainly intriguing. It's certainly intriguing. Looks like James is going to be joining us in just one sec. By the way, guys, appreciate you guys support. Let's take a look at the questions. You can tell that I am not used to doing this on the hosting side as much as I used to. I used to do it all the time, but different role now. There doesn't appear to be many prospects out there left to be called up, but who are some remaining prospects that be called up that might make an impact towards the end of the season? I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this question because it's definitely something that I am well equipped to talk about. So, number one, Junior Caminero, and it's worth pointing out that he's homered. As of Monday, he had 4 homers in his last 8 games. I didn't get a chance to see what he did yesterday. That would be number one on my list for sure. He is somebody that has to be under roster consideration. Kobe Mayo, and obviously the intrigue of Mayo adds a little bit with, Ramon Urias not performing up to a great standard, and the fact that Mike Elias has said we plan on this guy being a helper for us. He might be the most complete hitting prospect still in the minors. It's close. I would say that maybe Caminero has more upside, but you could argue that Kobe Mayo, and I would not have expected this coming into the year, maybe a more complete hitter. Now, neither one going to help you a ton in steals, but I think that the average tool probably goes to Caminero, even though he's hit for a much lower average. I would go with hey, let's just James about this right now. Hey, James, how's it going, man?
What's up, Chris? Happy to be here.
Much. Hey, we were just talking about prospect stuff, and we were talking about Junior Caminero and Kobe Mayo. Which one of those two do you prefer as a stash?
As a stash, I'll probably lean Caminero, because you have to think if he's coming up, it probably meant that there were some players traded from the Rays, whereas the Orioles, I still think it's going to be relatively difficult for Mayo. I think he will come up, but I doubt that he'll get every single day playing time that we're going to want for most of the leagues that we're playing in. So if I had to lean one way, I think it would be Caminero. Also, I still question how easy it will be for a right-handed power hitter to really make an impact right away in New Camden Yards, where Caminero could walk in and just crush off the bat.
I'm still not used to Baltimore, man. I'm still not used to that being such an important thing. But yeah, I think that's a good point. And look, Kobe Mayo's got power to all fields and all of that good stuff. Are there any other prospects that you can think of that you're really outside of Caminero and Mayo that you're really intrigued by for these final 2 months? We have seen so many promoted that it's kind of tough right now. But
Jacob Wilson, I was briefly until the hamstring. I think,
bummer.
I think a very sneaky one might be Drew Gilbert on the Mets. I think that Gilbert is someone who had a lot of upper minors experience last year and was starting the year in AAA and was about to be ready to be an outfield option for the Mets, but he pulled his hamstring in the third week of April. He just came back. He'll be back playing AAA games this week, and Starling Marte has not even begun one baseball activity yet, and the Mets have been more linked to pitching at the deadline rather than hitting, even though as a Mets fan, I'd love for them to go after some bats at the deadline. But if Gilbert comes back and has a good week or two in the minors, and the Mets can't keep just running out DJ Stewart and Ben Gamble in their lineup every day, there's a good chance that he gets some time before the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. I could see that. A nice high floor prospect is always a dangerous term, but I do think that there is something to that profile that can definitely help. Another one I wanted to ask you about, because this was such an interesting one from Jada that took me forever to answer. He had pick 3 for next year's points league: Reagans, Crochet, Langford, Wood, Caminero. First of all, again, congrats on the roster. That's absolutely awesome. A lot of fun stuff. Which of those 3 is the most intriguing to you, James?
I would have said Cole Reagans until this morning when everyone's talking about Cole Reagans' velocity being down recently.
Yeah.
And I talked about Reagans last week in our post I did for Rotoworld about innings limits. And I think that he's someone that his team, I don't think wants him to have an innings limit, but he's probably at the point of his season where if he were to start to get reduced, it'd probably help him for next year. Seeing these now, Crochet's in the same spot. Crochet's such a weird one because if he gets traded, he probably throws 70, 80 more innings a season. If he doesn't get traded, he might throw 20. And I think I like him next year more the less he throws this year. So if we have to decide right now, I weirdly, strangely, based on the way the season has gone, might lean Langford. And then probably then Crochet, then Reagans, then Caminero, then Wood. But I think that can move around a bit, just depending on what we see for the next 3 to 4 weeks over Reagans and Crochet.
So you would have Wood last on that list?
I think slightly less. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I don't know, $2 might not be a big deal in this league. We're seeing Caminero and Wood. I think
that's a good point.
If that's not a big deal, then I'd go Wood. But I think those two, I probably would rank pretty similarly going to next year. Again, maybe if I need some more speed, lean Wood. But in terms of just pure hitting, if I'm looking at like a WOBA projection, I think Caminero might be a better hitter than Wood immediately.
Question from Dad, good old Dad. What do we do with Ranger Suarez? He's turned in a few back-to-back stinkers, and I'm afraid I've missed my sell window. I've always been extremely high on Suarez, and I was feeling, I hate victory laps, but I was feeling pretty good about it until a couple of starts recently. Are you still intrigued by Suarez for the rest of the year?
Definitely. I just think it's important to give realistic expectations for a guy like Ranger Suarez. There was no reason that he came out as a guy with a 1.3 career whip and had a 0.7 whip this season. Like that's just he at the end of the day is a control artisan, and a control artisan will look incredible on some days, but some days you just slept on the wrong side of the bed, your neck's a little stiff, and you just can't
Sure.
turn, you can't twist, your mechanics are off, and mechanics are a big reason for command. So if you're not blowing people away, you can just oscillate. And I think that's okay. I think it's where Ranger Suarez still is, and I think where he expects to be is way better than you thought he was going to be in March. So you take that victory, but he is not an ace anymore. He's definitely not the guy we saw in May, and that might not be great, but it's also not that bad. You're still looking at someone with nearly a 20% strikeout minus walk rate. This still is a top 30 pitcher in fantasy baseball rather than a top 10.
Right. And, if to answer your questions about your sell window, you probably missed the chance to sell him as an ace. But if you are somebody who's looking to make a move for a bat or someone like that, I do think Ranger Suarez will still have intrigue in your league. Just don't sell super low. Like, don't expect him to be a guy who has the type of numbers that he's put up in those back-to-back clunkers that you mentioned. Just have the expectation of him being, like you said, a top 30 SP2, SP3, right on that range. That's certainly valuable. It's just, if somebody did offer you something where he was ranked as an SP1, maybe missed that boat just a little bit. Appreciate all the questions, guys. And again, please keep them coming, whether you're on Twitch, YouTube, whatever. James, so with the deadline coming up, is there any particular player that you would love to see moved from a fantasy perspective?
Yeah, I think Crochet, because Crochet is the kind of guy where if he winds up on the Dodgers or the Orioles and this whole thing keeps churning, you're looking at maybe the best overall pitcher in fantasy over the next 2 months. And another guy I really hope gets moved for fantasy, just because I don't know. I love these like cheap kind of bats this time of year, try and get like a little spark in like a 5 outfield league. I'd love to see Winker get to a contender because he's the kind of guy, and that's such a stupid, like, weird niche answer, but he's the kind of guy where you put him in a playoff race right now, I just think he's going to go ape, and he's 130 WRC plus this year. I think he's up almost around 35 extra base hits in total, and he's like, the Nationals lineup is better than expected, but it's still not producing the kind of runs that if he wound up on a Phillies or on a Mets or on the Dodgers, some teams that could definitely use a corner outfielder right now. I think that he has he's a lot of runway there. Same with guys like Rooker, even a guy like Tommy Pham for really cheap. I just posted a big trade deadline thread. That's why I was late up here. But
no worries.
I think there's a lot of those fun, weird little, like, quirky corner outfield bats that could do a lot after the deadline.
I like those calls a lot. On the reverse side, this is mostly reliever chat, because of this is what happens is guys that, are closers and then get moved. Is there anyone in particular that you would prefer to stay in his same situation? The one that automatically comes to mind for me is Carlos Estevez, just because I think if he does get traded, he's probably going to a high leverage role, but one that limits his fantasy value. Is there anyone else you can think of that would hurt?
Finnegan, for sure. Kyle Finnegan. Oh yeah. I just at most playoff bullpens, I don't think he's good enough to close, but his Nationals team, he's really found his spot there. And he's been one of the most reliable closers in fans this year, kind of strangely. And then another one, probably Tanner Scott. But there's a weird chance that he might close if he goes somewhere. But he's been freakish for like going on 2 straight months now. I just watched him pitch against the Mets this weekend, and he threw his hardest pitch of the season. He got up to 100 miles an hour a few times. It's just like watching him, I'm like, it's astounding to watch a lefty throw like that. He's like if Billy Wagner was 6 inches taller, 50 pounds heavier. He's amazing. But I think if any of those guys get moved, they're not closers anymore. I can't think of any other closers that might be on the move. Do you got any others?
No, I think those are pretty much it. Like Finnegan and Estevez are the two guys that I think, if they get moved, they're not completely devoid of fantasy value, but it goes down substantially, because so much of their value, it's not posting the elite K rate. Tanner Scott would be someone I think still has some, because he strikes out so many guys, but boy, not getting those saves and having to deal with that whip would be something that you'd have to keep in mind as well. There has been some talk about Seattle interested in packaging a trade package for Jazz Chisholm and for Tanner Scott. And then I would think that would be a situation where Scott is not the closer. He would be that high leverage guy to go with Andres Munoz. So just something to keep in mind. It's one of those things where sometimes you may want to look to move one of those closers just to be ready for the fact that if they don't get the chance to play for those teams anymore, they may not get those save opportunities. How long do you carry Noelvi Marte before dropping him? Marte, one of my favorite long-term plays. As a Seattle Mariner fan, I'm still happy with that trade, but I definitely acknowledge that Noelvi Marte can be someone that they can regret moving at some point. But with the steroid suspension and then just some ugly numbers in AAA as well, and then, upon the call-up, Are you cutting bait on Noelvi Marte for 2024?
Yeah, I cut Noelvi in the 112 team. I had him before the All-Star break. It just doesn't seem like it's working right now. It's very clear he's pressing. He's
Yeah.
expanding the zone. He's swinging, missing a lie, swinging out of his shoes. He hit that one home run over the weekend, but then just the rest of that game was continuing to chase every single breaking ball and pitch outside the zone that pitcher would throw at him. Just feels like it's not there right now. Just might have to chalk it up to a lost season because of that suspension and hope you can buy a dip if you still believe in 2025.
James, I wanted to ask you about Lawrence Butler because these last 10 games have been stupid. He has hit 9 extra base hits, 5 homers, 3 doubles, 1 triple in his last 37 at bats. And acknowledging that's a small sample size, he's hitting 412 with a 1.00, that 1,000 slugging percentage. You know, Butler was considered one of the better prospects for Oakland, but never considered an elite fantasy guy. But he's kind of showing that there's some upside here. Are you interested in Butler at all in a redraft league?
Totally. How could you not be interested in Butler right now? No one's hitting the ball better than him. He's doing such a good job of attacking pitches in the heart of the zone that are coming to him just because that's just will happen in the course of that bat. And he's doing tremendous damage. He was someone that popped a couple months ago when all that new bat tracking data came out in StatCast, where it's like, let's just find any player who swings hard who's maybe not producing very well. It's like, oh, Lawrence Butler is one of them, along with Lars Newbarks. He's on every single one of those lists ever. But now that Butler's out there every single day, is the top of that lineup. He's still only 24 years old. He was someone that always had relatively high-end pedigree compared to where he was kind of viewed in fantasy and baseball circles. Just, I don't think Lawrence Butler is going to contend the rest of the year, but this is a hot streak that you just have to ride while you're in it. And if it stops, it stops. But you might as well be along for it rather than watch it go by.
Yeah, what's the worst thing that happens, right? Like obviously you're not dropping one of your better players for him because of course you're not. But at the same time, we're deep enough in the year where riding the hot wave, I think, is really important. And to get a guy who is seeing the baseball clearly that well and putting up those kind of numbers is something that you can't ignore. Somebody who is
I have a would you rather for you on Lawrence Butler.
Okay.
Rest of the season, would you rather Lawrence Butler or Rhys Hines?
Oh, that's a fun one. I would probably go with Butler just because, man, the swing and miss for Hines in AAA was just so palpable, man. Like, I think it was 126 strikeouts and 298 at bats. I only remember those numbers a little bit because I was talking to somebody on the radio in Cincinnati about him. The upside with Hines is palpable. Like, you see it. Like, but at the same time, I just feel like that is going to crash really, really hard. How about you?
Yeah, same. It just feels like the second coming of Aristides Aquino. I can't believe we found a way to do this again. Hines weirdly on Fantrax was third base eligible. So there were a lot of leagues I just needed corner help where I was like, I'm gonna take my big shot right now on Rhys Hines because maybe not, but otherwise it's hard to I think Butler's firmly a better option than him rest of the season.
So a guy who has not been very hot over his last 10 games is Ben Rice. He is hitting 100, 213, 275. He does have the 2 homers, and our buddy Dad asks the question. He's been super cold since his 3-homer game. Should I look to someone like Austin Wells or someone else or keep Rice? What are you doing with Ben Rice right now?
I do like Austin Wells a lot, but Rice, I know it's not been good the last couple of games, but he's still hitting the top of the Yankees lineup. He still takes tons of walks. He still never expands the strike zone. He still gets around on the ball, hits the ball in the air as a pretty good clip, especially for a rookie. I'm holding through Ben Rice. Even I don't know. Like I'm never gonna get Ben Rice for batting average. Like that was never my purpose for Ben Rice.
Right.
Like, I want these spark games. Like I want this crazy pop. Like I want to score a bunch of runs hitting in front of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. If you need a catcher, maybe Wells. But most leagues, if Rice is a catcher, Wells might be hitting better than him right now, but Rice will wind up with more plate appearances because he's playing first base every single day rather than catcher. And that's like those kind of like annoying like micro decisions that probably mean more in a 15-team league or something like that. But if I have Rice, I'm not going to cut bait right now, especially if you have that little cheat code with the catcher first base thing.
There you go. Yeah, and he's one of those guys that it's similar to. In one way, they are not similar players whatsoever, and in some ways, they're kind of similar. It's similar to the Isaiah Kiner-Falefa thing, where when he was catcher eligible, there was a ton of value there, and then as soon as he moves over, other than the fact they're both Yankees, very little similarities between the two players. But yeah, you're hanging on to him for the counting stats. You're hoping that he can be a guy who can produce some RBI, he can produce some homers. And I think he will on enough of a consistent basis to keep him in, especially at the catcher position. One other guy who's been red hot with the bat that I wanted to ask you about is Victor Robles. Over his last 9 games, he's 11 for 25, 440, 500, 560 slash. Most intriguing is the fact that he has stolen 5 bases, and it kind of looks like he's not sewn up per se a long-term spot with the Seattle Mariners, but he's certainly going to be playing with the rest of that team stinking. How intrigued are you with Victor Robles right now?
I don't know what the Mariners have done to Victor Robles that they can't do to any other hitter on their team. But for some reason, he's almost up to 60 batted balls and the barrel rate is 15%. Like, I don't understand how this is something that's transferred to just Victor Robles. He hit 1 home run in this streak with the team, and it went 430 feet. It's like I don't know what's happening. But similar to Lawrence Butler, like, I'm not going to say no to this right now. And we always like Victor Robles. He's still 27 years old. Like, there's probably, weirdly enough, like his teammate, it's a different skill set, but there's probably a weird, like, Michael Taylor type renaissance here where it's like, you still play elite defensive outfield. We'll give you as many chances to hit as you possibly can. But again, I just don't know why he's doing it. No one else on this team could possibly do it. Like, why does Victor Robles have more power than Julio Rodriguez right now? Like, what is it the same hitting coach? Like, what's wrong there?
It's so weird, but it's been so fun to see because, I was a massive Victor Robles fan as a prospect guy. I thought that he was going to be a 5-category player. And look, he's only 27 years old. There's time for him to figure it out. Am I skeptical that he can have an expected slugging percentage of 478 and that he's going to barrel the baseball 14.5% of the time? You bet your sweet bippy I'm skeptical of that. But he doesn't have to do that to be fantasy relevant. Like, the fact that he takes good plate appearances, the fact that he's not swinging at pitches outside of the strike zone very much, 25% chase rate, the fact that he does have that speed, and the fact that he's running pretty much at every opportunity, yeah, there's absolutely a chance. And with Luke Raley and Mitch Haniger, who has just been so awful for Seattle, and Dom Canzone, not good and not likely to come back up anytime soon, I think Victor Robles is going to be a thing, and I'm excited for it. It's fun to see this. Baseball's a really hard game, James. Like, it's fun to see when these guys make that adjustment. And sure, it's a small sample size. I think it's 41 plate appearances with the Mariners, but it's 41 really good plate appearances. It isn't it fun when we see stuff like this?
Yeah, but it's also it's fun until the point someone wins your league because Victor Robles stole 27 bases from July 9th to the end of the season. That's the part that's not fun. But if that's you that did it, that makes it more fun. So you might as well try and jump in. A 10% walk rate in this kind of sprint speed, like, you just can't say no.
No, absolutely not. Victor Robles or Dalton Varsho? That's an interesting one. Which way you go?
Robles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Varsho looks broken. I don't know. All the things that he's supposed to do well, he doesn't do well anymore. And same that Ben Rice conversation. Second, he lost the catcher eligibility. The whole thing just felt a lot less sexy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I mean, Robles stealing bags.
Maybe Robles and Dalton Varsho need to have a conversation so that they can figure out what he can do.
Just don't send Robles to Toronto where hitters go to die.
Yeah. Jada, what happened to Matt Olson? Boy, this has been one of the more disappointing seasons. I was taking a look at WRC Plus and looking at where Matt Olson ranked and was absolutely shocked. Sometimes you just kind of you can't check on every player at all times. And I just assumed Matt Olson was having a nice little year. No, not really. What's going on with Matt Olson?
Olson, I heard I think Sayers is talking about it, and I heard Olson also talk about it on I think with one of the reporters or something. But he said that he's done basically a really weird thing, just cool little baseball caveat. He did so much to close his hole at the top of the zone the last few years that he says he's developed one now in the bottom of the zone. And everything that he's done well to fix himself in one part of the strike zone, now he's being exploited low in the strike zone. And he has one of the worst whiff rates for his career, pitches low middle. He's still not whiffing a lot on pitches low and outside, low and inside, but he's doing a lot less damage on them. And it's becoming just something where it's like a little tango that happens in a baseball player's career, where you adjust and the league adjusts back, and you adjust and the league adjusts back. It's just not the same approach as he used to have. Then when it turns out, if you look at Baseball Savant has an amazing tool where he zones, and you can see there are different stats in different zones of the plate. And just seeing his raw barrels, Matt Olson has 11 barrels directly in the heart of the zone, and there's nowhere else in the strike zone he has more than 4. So it's just he right now isn't able to do much with bad pitches. So it's all about him really focusing on finding those pitches that are the mistakes. But if they don't come, it doesn't seem like he can do as much as we're used to seeing him doing ever in his career right now. So interesting season for Olson, and probably gets a little better just based on the laws of averages, but it's probably not the top 3 first basemen you expected him to be at this point.
Yeah, I was just taking a look too at the data, and that's another thing I love about Baseball Savant is that being able to take a look at what he's done against certain pitches, against cutters this year, and he has 45 plate appearances against them. Expected batting average of 150 and expected slugging percentage of 191. Actual numbers 128 and 205. So that's not a huge amount of sample size here, but against four seam fastballs, even like. The expected slugging percentage of 517 is nice, but Matt Olson should be slugging a lot higher than 418 against four seam fastballs, man. This is a guy who has such elite power. I'd bet on a nice couple of months for him, but it's definitely been frustrating to see so far. Mr. 28, Adele or Chisholm in a points league. Which one do you like, sir?
Chisholm, right? How could it not be?
Yeah.
I don't know. Jazz, I'm big on Adele in the second half, and he started hot last night. I think he's the kind of guy where there's so much in his profile right now, and he's going to play every single day. He's someone that if you need some upside in your roster, I would roster Joe Adele. But Jazz is just too good. The floor is so much better. He's also very likely going to get moved. He's very likely going to be in a contender for the first time in his career. So there's probably some upside on Jazz just mentally. I love Jazz Chisholm. I'm a big Jazz fan. I have been for a while. It's just he's too good to compare to Joe Adele in that sense.
You know what I think? And look, this is really hard to actually quantify here too, but there's been a lot of stuff that's come out about Jazz Chisholm being maybe not the best guy in the locker room.
Yeah.
Difficult. I think that actually may be a benefit to fantasy managers because I think when Jazz Chisholm is traded, and it's a win, I think unless something bad happens to him or, the Marlins somehow win 30 games in their next 10, they're going to move Jazz Chisholm. And I think that you're going to see a very, very motivated Jazz Chisholm to prove a lot of people wrong. I think that he is a guy who's well aware of what people are saying about him. Is there a particular landing spot you'd like to see? There's been a lot of talk about, again, Chisholm to Seattle. Is there a team that you'd like to see him land at?
Yeah, I'm biased, but the New York Mets.
No,
I would love to see a combo corner outfielder, second baseman fix this lineup. I think the Pirates would be awesome. I know the Yankees were linked to Robert. I can't really see them going after either of these outfielders, but Jazz he has this label of being difficult, but I don't think he's ever respected the leadership on his own team, which is a big problem. And that's a problem for Jazz, but it's also a function of these horrible Marlins teams. Like there was an incident with Miguel Rojas when Jazz was a rookie, where apparently he was sleeping just before a team meeting, and Miguel Rojas was proud not to wake up the young rookie before, like star rookie before the team meeting, where it's like, if I'm a leader, like I want to make sure this person has all the opportunity to succeed, not set them up for failure.
Yeah.
And then they bring in Avi Garcia, who had a checkered personal past, and he was making a ton of money on most of the team, and he was awful too. So Jazz just had to watch these guys older than him and worse at baseball than him try to tell him what to do. Mm-hmm. And if he is a little defiant, like that's on him. But if he gets to a team with a real veteran core and real like in the playoff picture, I think you could just see him go ballistic.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it at all. That all of the talent is there for him to be an upper echelon player. We've seen it in spurts. I would love to see it over the last 2 months. One final one here, and Dad, you do not have to apologize for asking questions, my man.
Keep going.
We've talked about Jeffrey Springs before, but do we feel he would be decent for ratios? Probably won't be good for quality start leagues. Yeah, I don't imagine you're going to get a ton of 6-inning outings from him, and but I do think that the rates are going to be pretty good for Jeffrey Springs. How interested are you in him for the rest of 2024?
Yeah, weirdly, him and Rasmussen might give you some sneaky good ratios. Rasmussen, I just saw him hit 99 miles an hour in one of his rehab outings. But the Rays are probably going to shed these players. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Zach Eflin's not on this team next week. I don't know if Zach Littell's going to be on this team next week. Shane Baz is pitching, but he's not someone who has tons of innings left on his arm this year because of everything. I don't think he's ever thrown more than 100 innings in a professional season, and he's had like 4 or 5 of them. So I think the Rays are going to give those guys good 50-pitch spurts. It would have to be a deep league, though, to rely on them for ratios. Because you're likely not going to get a win. You're also likely not going to get tons of strikeouts. Neither of those guys were huge strikeout guys before they got injured. So it's something to watch and something to do, but I wouldn't be laser focused on either of these guys, truthfully.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. That's going to do it for us. James, promote all the good work you're doing over at Rotoworld and elsewhere, my friend.
Yeah, Rotoworld, just out here in the recap staff, a couple features here and there. Twitter, I'm the most active, James_Schiano. I just posted a big thread about the trade deadline. And also, if you guys are Mets fans, I have a Mets podcast called Mets Up. So pretty good stuff there. I have some Mets draftees, I think, coming on this week.
Oh, that's great. You can follow me at Crawford_MILB. My OY is my Seattle Mariner podcast or YouTube show. It's kind of a podcast. I don't ever know what to call it. It's not great, but I would appreciate you guys checking it out. And again, you can read my top 10 prospects for 2024 from a fantasy perspective. That goes up every Monday. Really appreciate the questions. Believe we'll be back next week unless we did something too bad. And, anything's possible. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Talk to you soon.